Good afternoon once again. Could you all please stand for the arrival of the Governor General? Please sit. Good afternoon. Let me express a very warm welcome to you all to this, the inaugural public lecture at the Five Islands campus. We are delighted that just on the cusp of 3 years, we have launched our first public lecture. Within the international business context, the diamond model, also known as Porter's diamond or Porter diamond theory of national advantage, describes a nation's competitive advantage on the international market. The model posits 4 main attributes that Michael Porter claims are determinants of national competitive advantage, namely factor conditions, demand conditions, related and supporting industries, firm strategy, structure, and rivalry. The model also explains why some nations are competitive and others are not. These and other related questions will no doubt be explored in this evening's lecture. This inaugural public lecture promises a scholarly, thought-provoking discourse, perhaps controversial, indeed insightful, and certainly enriching, as the distinguished professor of international business and principal of the Five Islands campus delves into the topic based on his recent research and his vast experience in this area of study. Once again, let me extend a very warm welcome to you all. Please allow me to address a few housekeeping matters. I ask that all cell phones and other electronic devices be turned off during this evening's public lecture. Additionally, on coming into the hall, you will have noticed that a bookshop was in place where 2 of Professor Williams's books will be available for sale. Once again, let me extend a very warm welcome to you all. I'd like now to invite Mr. Solomon Dumit to make some brief remarks before an interlude of entertainment. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Sir Rodney Williams, Governor General, members of Parliament, members of the Diplomatic Corps, UE executives and officials, education officials, specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. As I begin, I would like to thank you for the honor of delivering a few remarks as we are privileged to hear the distinguished Professor Denzel Williams this evening. I accepted this invitation with much gratitude and great honor. As Managing Director of ACT, I speak here tonight wearing two hats, not just from the private sector, but also more pointedly from a technological standpoint within the private sector. With the installation of the UWI 5-island campus, Antigua now is the first of the small islands to host a University of the West Indies, and the shift this causes is undoubtedly beneficial to all citizens. The influence of academia and the viability of an institution of higher learning generates on both the government and the private sector, positively impacts the local as well as the regional economy in instigating job creation. The bearing of academia affects all members of our society, and this impact is not specific to graduates alone, but to all who the wave of progress reaches. A local university's effect stretches far and wide in linking the steps between an idea's conception and its implementation. The elevation granted by exposure to intellects generated on our own soil is self-propelling. The role of academics is to lead change in a range of subject areas and to ensure that these lead towards sustainable and viable job opportunities. I'm especially excited with this direction that the university is headed in terms of creating digital learners, as this is common knowledge that these days almost everything is driven by technology. With the School of Science, Computing, and Artificial Intelligence, our local students will not only be left behind, and both the government and the private sector should welcome this change. Essentially, technology changes faster than the weather, and we should treat young minds as we do with technology and nurture this transformation. I have heard Professor Williams tag the quote, "Friends of all, enemy of none." And I found this to be telling on all levels of interpersonal relationships. He did reference it regarding international relations, however, but if implemented right locally on a citizen to citizen level, a lot of difference can and will take place. The collaboration between the government, the private sector, and the academic institution of UWI is suggestive of a step-by-step innovation towards the financial betterment of our Twin Island state. The philosophy, if adopted, promotes interconnectedness, where each sector benefits while simultaneously urging the other sector to gain advancement concurrently. The government, by its injection of capital, believes that education is our kryptonite, and in doing so, allows both the government itself as well as the members of the private sector to benefit from higher learning. As a result of this, the return on investment to the citizen is an elevated and educated nation. It's a win-win-win situation, creating a triple helix model of innovation, where each body retains a strong role and in its original field of expertise. The university remains the main source of knowledge production, where the private sector is the primary vehicle of commercialization, and the government remains its regulatory role. I know that our goal is not just to be proud of the institution of the UWI 5-island campus, but also to take full advantage of the fact that we have at our fingertips a place of higher learning. Undeniably, the world of work is changing, and UWI has gone a step further to institute the lifelong learning unit. Here, short courses are being offered and are designed to prepare individuals to learn new skills, strengthen existing skills, and learn and earn credentials, including within this, the Harvard Business School Credential of Readiness Program. This leads any adult through the gateway to prepare for career advancement or a career change. UWI is given opportunity for our citizens to experience a shift sway towards progress. The psychology of productivity is one way an engaged citizen who earns his living and advances his station and that of his family is a happier person. The effects on the entire community becomes more positive, and this transfers from one citizen to the next. Just as negativity and ignorance are contagious, so is positivity and progression. Empowering people changes generations. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dumit. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Jafari Hazelwood, a panelist and a student within the School of Science, Computing and Artificial Intelligence, to entertain you. Jafari. Jafari, for that wonderful rendition. This time, I'd like to invite Dr. Karen Murdoch, Senior Lecturer in the School of Business and Management, to introduce the speaker of the first public lecture at the Five Islands campus. Dr. Karen Murdoch.
All established protocol observed. Good evening. Competitiveness and competitive advantage is at the heart of every country's economic performance. Most competitive economies perform better than least competitive ones. Gaining and maintaining competitiveness is therefore an important pursuit of business, government, and society. Understanding of in the symbiosis of the modern free market economy. It's therefore important that we understand the roles of the different stakeholders in this relationship if we are to build competitiveness, especially as we find ourselves in a state where we are seeking to develop, we're seeking to promote economic development and prosperity as we move forward. It is for this reason that we have invited you here this evening to share insights as well as research into Antigua and Barbuda's competitive diamond, a framework for establishing the roles and responsibilities of the important stakeholders in gaining and maintaining this elusive competitiveness. To present this evening's lecture, we have one of the region's best qualified person in this area, an all-time high achiever in the form of Professor Denzel Williams. He is Professor of International Business and Strategy. He's principal of the Five Islands campus, in addition to being the Pro Vice Chancellor for Industry, Academic Partnership, and Planning at the UWI. He is the former Executive Director of the Mona School of Business and Management, which is located at the Mona campus of the University of the West Indies, and which also happens to be the largest business school in the Caribbean. He is a two-time graduate of the UWI Mona. He earned his PhD in International Business and Strategy from the Manchester Business School, University of Manchester in the United Kingdom. And he holds the distinction of being the youngest person promoted to the rank of professor in the history of the UWI Mona campus. And that is in addition to being also the first person in the more than 40 years history of business and management education at UWI Mona to be promoted to the rank of professor. Professor Williams' scholarly output include more than 60 work in the areas of economic development, small firm strategy, and economic competitiveness in academic journals, in book chapters, as well as conference proceedings. And that is in addition to numerous other non-refereed work. He has been quite productive scholar. He's the author of 5 books, 2 of which won outstanding research awards at the UWI. In 2013 and 2015, he was recognized as the most outstanding scholar in the Faculty of Science, Social Sciences at the UWI Mona campus. Professor Williams has delivered keynote addresses in prestigious conferences, both in the public and the private sector in the Caribbean, North America, in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, Australasia, as well as the Middle East. Denzel served as chairman, deputy chairman, director on a number of boards, both in the public as well as the private sector in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. Prior to joining academia in 2006, he worked as a business analyst in strategy and transformation in the former Cable and Wireless Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the podium our distinguished speaker, Professor Dr. Denzel Williams.
Thank you very much, Dr. Murdoch, for such warm introduction. When I sat there and I was listening, I thought I was dead and gone to heaven. But then I looked in the audience and I saw some of my friends and I said, this couldn't be heaven. So I get back to myself. Ladies and gentlemen, one and all, let me say how pleased I am to be here this evening to actually participate in this presentation. And I would like it to be a conversation about economic development, which is so dear to my heart. I have done a lot of work in this area, and I thought that as we unravel the global environment and the global challenges that are there, it would be very important for us to take stock at home as to where we are and what we need to do to play in this very inhospitable global environment. And so it is really that has caused the genesis of this presentation this evening. So I'm very happy to participate in the discourse that will take place over the next few minutes. But before I do that, it would be remiss of me not to say a special welcome to our very distinguished invited guest, one and all. You're too many to be called by name, so I will not get myself in trouble. But what I will say to you is that you're very distinguished because the invitation list went out to only a set of distinguished people that we wanted. So the fact that you're here, you're distinguished. But ladies and gentlemen, it will be remiss of me, however, not to recognize especially our Governor General, Sir Rodney Williams. Thank you so much, sir, for coming. Our leader of the opposition party, Mr. Harold Lovell. I know it's busy time for you. So thank you very much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us. And it really speaks a lot to your commitment to national development, to take time from your busy schedule to be here. I would like to also recognize all the executives of the university, my fellow colleagues online. There are so many persons online that we know that are joining us from across the Caribbean as well, our pro-vice chancellors and principals, etc., the executives at the Five Islands campus and other university executives. But I would like to also recognize especially Justice Anne-Marie Smith. Thank you very much, Justice, for being here. I know, again, it's a very busy time for you, and you've taken time out of your schedule to be here. And I also recognize our Campus Council Deputy Chairman. He doesn't like when I say that, but Honorable Justin Simon. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. We're really happy for you to take time out of your really hectic schedule. I know your time is expensive. So for you to be here, then we know that, it's very, 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 very important. And Ambassador Davin Joseph, thank you very much. Let me also recognize our friends from China, from the Chinese embassy. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. Just a few weeks ago, we celebrated with our Chinese counterparts their gift to our university to modernize our plant. And we want to really say thank you very much, Madam Ambassador and colleagues, for that gift. And we look forward to continued partnership with you. Ladies and gentlemen, as I said, it's really a very great evening. When I heard Solomon spoke earlier, I started getting nervous because I'm saying, I don't know what I will say again because he said everything that I wanted to say. But I thought about it and I said, being a goodly professor, what you normally do on occasions like these, you reframe the question. And when you reframe the question, you find a thesis that you build around the question. And so, Solomon, I am going to take from your wisdom the reframing of the discourse this evening and see if I can build a thesis around it and hope that at the end of it all, you will say, well done. Okay? So, colleagues, friends, I really want us to have a conversation about this particular topic. I'm not going to spend all the time talking. I would prefer to lay the issues on the table. I'm not sure if we can get this thing off, this light off though, because I would prefer that persons can see here. Who controls this light? I want you to be able to see the board. Yeah. So right. So as yes, that is that okay for everyone? Yes, good. So as you all recognize, what we're here talking about today is upgrading a nation's diamond for national competitiveness. And specifically, we're looking at the case of Antigua and Barbuda. Now, this is so critical because, as I said before, every nation really needs to start thinking very seriously, especially in this day and age, when the global forces are becoming so inhospitable, as to how they make their environment attractive for doing business so that they can improve their overall economic performance and eventually improve the performance of the people that they serve. And that's very important to actually note. Okay. So we're using Antigua and Barbuda as a case study today, but the work can be extended to many other economies across the globe. And this is a piece of work that I've been carrying out for a period of time, as Dr. Murdoch would have said earlier. So what I wanted to do this afternoon is to really share some insights with you and also to get your own feedback in terms of what your thoughts are and how you see this shaping up in the broader context of the development of Antigua and Barbuda, but the wider OECS region. This is a very critical region, and later on you will see why I call it critical in this discourse. So I'm going to be looking at the thesis, and then I'm going to talk about how we get there based on the thesis that we have put forward. And then I want to end with some important recommendations about what I see from the data and where we should be going in terms of improving our overall performance. So most of you would know this person here, Honorable Gaston Brown, Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda. And notice he says adapted, so I don't want it to be misquoted to say Gaston said. I am adapting what he said. When I came to Antigua a few years ago, and having listened and followed Prime Minister Brown as a distinguished Caribbean Prime Minister, we've always talked about making Antigua become the economic powerhouse of the region. Yes? Oh, you want me to hold this? Oh, not quite. Yes, I have to move. Yeah, but I don't want to be holding the mic. Yeah? Do we have one I can put on there? Okay, good. Right. So Prime Minister Brown have always talked about Antigua and Barbuda being the economic powerhouse of the region. And what I've done is to try and give it, Sir Rodney, a little bit more context. As I said, if you're a teacher, then they said your objectives must be smart. Yeah. So I tried to put the thesis in a little bit more context to say, assuming Prime Minister Brown said to you, as a citizen of citizens of Antigua and Barbuda, that by 2030, Mr. Lovell, we want Antigua and Barbuda to become the economic powerhouse of the region. So that is very specific. It's time bound. It says what he wants. Okay? So let us take that as our thesis for today. We're taking that as our thesis. And every prime minister, every country is going to want a thesis like this, whether it be 2030, 2050, 2055, what have you. And they will say, we want our economy to become XYZ. So in the case of Antigua and Barbuda, the working thesis is that you want to become the economic powerhouse of the region by 2030. If that is the case, then you have to understand what you need to do to get there. So my guiding question really is this. What will Antigua and Barbuda need to do to achieve the Prime Minister's vision by 2030? Now, if I was in my normal lecture, I would ask the class to form groups, and people were going to be in groups and they're going to chat for a few minutes and then they come back and do a plenary. Unfortunately, you get away from that this evening. Yeah. So I have the burden of telling you what we need to do. Okay. So what will Antigua and Barbuda need to do to get to the Prime Minister's vision? It's not a hypothetical vision, it's a possible vision. We can get there, but we need to do some stuff. To better understand that, we really need to understand where Antigua and Barbuda sit in the world, because you're going to be an economic powerhouse, isn't it so? So you have to know where you sit in the world. Now, if you look at this map, I don't know if anybody can identify for me where Antigua and Barbuda resides on this map. This is a map of the world. And world economy has billion, 7 billion expected by 2030, which is when you want to get to economic powerhouse, to have 8.6 billion people. Just keep those figures in mind. 8.6 billion in the next 7 years. And today you are at 7.6 billion. And where is Antigua in that? Now, if you know your geography very well, and you look at this map and you extend it, you will realize that Antigua still can't be found anywhere close. It's somewhere here. Yeah? But that's not just Antigua. The entire Anglophone Caribbean region. The entire Anglophone Caribbean region, if you cluster everything together here, you still can't identify them in the broader scheme of the global economy. But that's just our reality. And that's not a reality that we need to be ashamed of. It's going to show you later on that actually this reality is going to be the reality of the future. Because of that 7.6 billion people that I just spoke about, what you're recognizing is over 57% of those live in what they call cities and towns. And by 2030, you will have 60% of the 8.6 billion people living in cities and towns. So when you look at the demographics of Antigua and Barbuda, by all estimation, we're all small economies. We're basically a city. But the future is the city. That's really what the future is. The future of the economy is the city. Big economies are going to go to what they call agglomeration economies. They're going to go to city. So when you look at the statistics for Antigua and Barbuda, just really 100,000 people, about 443 square kilometers, per capita income of 18,000 US, average GDP growth of about 4.8%, unemployment of about 8.7%. The major drivers of the economy, tourism, construction, and the emerging new economy. And again, as I said before, this really matches up to what the characteristics of cities are. Some cities will triple or double or quadruple this, yeah? But going forward, this kind of economic configuration is really where the globe is actually going. So cities don't have to start winning things to make themselves become competitive. So this is Antigua. But remember, the vision is to be what? An economic powerhouse by 2030. So if that is the vision, the really important thing is to say, what does an economic powerhouse look like? Yeah, because if you want to go somewhere, you're planning to go somewhere, you want to get there, but you have a plan, you really need to know what it is that you're going towards. Yes? So let us use a nice comparator to basically judge what Antigua would possibly need to do to become that economic powerhouse in another 7 to 10 years. So let's look at Singapore. And why do we choose Singapore? We choose Singapore because, again, like Antigua and Barbuda, Singapore is a city-state. By all means, all definitions geographically, it's a city-state. Singapore has about what, 4 million people. Land mass is almost the same thing as Antigua and Barbuda. Importantly, historically, when Singapore started left the Malay region in 1965, thereabout, Ambassador Joseph, it's about that time they left the Malay region. Yeah, it's roughly its per capita income. It's almost equal exactly where all of us in the Caribbean were at the time. I think Singapore per capita income in 1965 was about 675 US dollars thereabout. Jamaica was about 670 something as well. So we were all on the same page. That's really the point. All on the same page, coming out of the colonial era, was a part of a regional movement like we were a part of CARICOM, and they decided to go it on their own. They said, listen, we want to become an economic powerhouse, so we're going to go it on our own. And we're going to do what is required to do that. That's why it's a nice comparator to use. And there are other factors that I will talk about later on. But importantly, look at where Singapore's per capita income is after roughly 60 years. 61,000 US dollars, roughly. And remember now, Antigua, that needs to be a powerhouse, is at 18,000.
So that's the first marker, okay? So you need to know where you're going to go, yeah, to get there. So that's Singapore per capita income, that's Antigua's per capita income. And Antigua is trying to get to where the economic powerhouse is. Let's look at GDP growth as well. Per capita income and GDP growth. Average growth is almost epsilon, it's almost the same. Antigua is roughly 4.8, Singapore is 3.14. Almost the same. And you expect as a smaller economy with a smaller base that your growth should be faster. Yeah, because they have a smaller base. So you move faster. Okay? So I'm just using some quick examples as to how the economic powerhouse looks. Let us look at this. And everybody who have listened to me over the last 24 months know that this is one of my favorite pieces of data. Look at the post-secondary enrollment in Singapore versus Antigua. In Singapore, 8 out of every 10 kids that leave secondary school move on to post-secondary school. 8 out of 10, that's the data there, 83.9. You could call it, 8 out of 10. And what is it in Antigua? 24.8. So again, the economic powerhouse is having 8 of their students who leave secondary school going on to post-secondary school, university, and all of those fancy places. While in our region, Antigua is roughly 2 out of 10. Okay, good. And I'll show you some data later on. This is not just unique to Antigua, this is just data clear. Because later on we will come to some other data. And let us look at unemployment rate, the final piece of comparator that is critical to say to you how an economic powerhouse really performs. Yeah? So an economic powerhouse like Singapore, unemployment is roughly 3.6%. Epsilon. And Antigua and Barbuda is about 8.7%. Okay? So when you look at these pieces of data, it really gives you a nice benchmark to say how you need to position yourself in order to get there. Because nothing is wrong with a great vision, but you have to know where you are in order to move the vision forward. So what I've done is to provide you just a handful of data. There is much more detailed data in a book somewhere. The book is somewhere out there that you can look at. Yeah. But no, that's serious. But yeah, the book has a really more compact amount of data on these comparators that you can actually look at. Yeah. So that's Singapore. That's the comparator with the economic powerhouse and where Antigua wants to go. So the real issue is, how do you get there? So we're building the thesis, Solomon. So we know where we want to go. We see where we are. How are we going to get there? Well, I guess all of us here, we came to hear, what is this hell of a thing called a diamond that this man talking about? Yeah? What is this diamond? Well, simply put, your diamond is really this. And I'm sure that all the idiots in the room can recognize this, because they look diamond. But what is this? Well, in the case of what we're trying to do, a diamond is merely a metaphor. It is a metaphor for the confluence of factors that are impacting on the growth of an economy. It's a confluence of factors. It takes in economic factors, it takes in sociological factors, it takes in legal and regulatory, it takes in anthropological, it takes in everything, business and management. That's what the diamond is. So in essence, every single country has a diamond. Because it is really that confluence of factors that is actually putting things together and saying how they impacting on the economy. Yes, if you recognize that we're here, welcome. No, that's the problem with mass. You recognize. Thank you very much. And I recognize PSP specifically because of, as I said before, her significant role in ensuring that we're here today as a campus in the UWI. I will talk about that later on. But thank you. So the nation's diamond. And the diamond, as I said before, is just a metaphor for the confluence of factors that actually impact on the gold. But you're going to see exactly why Porter 1980 refers to this as a diamond when I go down further. But at the base of that diamond is this: every single country has what we call some level of endowments, right? Antigua and Barbuda, your natural endowments are what? Jamaica has bauxite, Trinidad has oil, Guyana has gold, and you can go on with the natural endowment. But every economy has some natural endowment, and the most important natural endowment is this: the human capital. Every economy has people. Even if you don't have anything, Singapore, as you know, don't have any natural endowments really. But what they have are people, and what they use was their people to become that economic powerhouse. So what you have your natural endowments as the basis of your diamond. Then you have some macroeconomic factors that are critical to make sure that your economy do well. I'm going to bring this on home soon. But what you have, for example, macroeconomic stability is an important part of an economy becoming competitive, because when you have instability in the macroeconomy, what it does, it brings unintended cost of doing business. So if your exchange rate is fluctuating, if your inflation is coming out of what, as you now see in the global economy, where inflation is running away, and every central bank has to be increasing interest rate to get this thing. Interest rate going up, your mortgage goes up. Inflation goes up, the price of food goes up, and so on and so forth. So it puts the economy out of what? So you need stability in the economy, which is steadiness of those critical variables. So that is a critical foundation of your economy as well. And then you need social and political institution stability. People need to know that when you come to do business in Antigua and Barbuda, if something goes wrong, the court will rule, and they will rule in a fair manner. Say, for example, you're transferring a property. People will know that as a businessman, you want property to be transferred just in Simon. Then you can go to the court and you can get a proper procedure to transfer property. You don't have bandits coming and tell you, this is my property. Those things matter for economic competitiveness. Right? So you need political and social stability. You need infrastructure development as well. That's critical. But also importantly, you need the micro factors now, which is really the quality of your business environment. You know more about that, Solomon, than most people. But you need clusters as well. And later on, I will talk a little bit about the role of clusters, because what you will see is that individual firms are going to find it very difficult to operate. People normally say, I don't want to locate where this man is located in his firm. So you have ACT, for example, and Hiram wants to set up another computer shop. People say, no, let me not set up close to Solomon. Let me go over to Heritage Care and set up. Actually, it's a bad idea. If you set up close to Solomon, you more than likely make more money, because you're actually benefiting from traffic that you get in and the cluster and the linkage. So you need linkages and clusters. Yeah? Don't be afraid of competition, and I'm going to talk about that shortly. But critically, you need to talk about the sophistication of the operations of your company. This is where the lecture wants to land today. So this is really what this is all about. Because this is really what my work has been about. How sophisticated are the firms that are operating in your country in order to build that diamond that we all spoke about. And then we can start having a conversation about economic growth. Because I've always said as a major thesis of mine, and Mr. Lovell, I'm sorry that you're going to hear this, but I tell you, governments don't make anything. Governments do not trade. It is businesses that do it. So what you need to do is to facilitate businesses. That's really what you need to do. And if you don't have that, that's really what this lecture is going to land on, but I will get there later on. So with all of this foundation coming together, this is now the diamond. Does it look anything familiar to what you saw earlier? This is it. So you put all of that together. And when you put all of that together, Porter came up with this very important metaphor and called it a diamond of national competitiveness. And what Porter basically says is that what you're going to have are some factor conditions, which is really the quality of your production and productivity processes, your human resources, your physical infrastructure, your ICT, all of those factor conditions matter for growth. Similarly, you have your demand conditions, and this is important because what this is saying is how sophisticated are the consumers in your country? If you have a country that your consumers settle for every and anything, forget it, you're not going to compete. Your consumers have to be demanding. Don't be afraid to be demanding. Go to the store and they give you something you don't like, it's it. order something online and they'll give you the quality that you want, say it. Because what that does, Sir Rodney, it allows you to improve and innovate your processes and become much better. That's how innovation works. That's how competition works. And I'm going to show you why that is important. So you have to talk about how sophisticated are your local customers, because what the study is showing is that countries with customers that are demanding and more sophisticated, those countries have firms that are competing globally. If your customers are just focusing on what is in your local conditions and say, oh, we're Antiguans, we're good, we don't have to worry about that. Forget it, you're not going to compete. That is just the reality of the world. You can't be Jamaican only, you can't be Antiguan only, you can't be Trini only. You can't say this is Trini standard now, or this is Jamaican standard. It must be how that standard can move into the globe. Because that is really what is going to happen. So if your demand conditions are not up there, you're going to be in trouble. And I'm going to show you some data later on to test each of these in the context of Antigua and Barbuda. Similarly, you have to have related and supported industries. As I said before, recall now that in every industrial sector that you operate, what you're always going to have are some feeder industries, but the feeder industries have to be of a certain quality as well for you to get your output. Let us take a simple example. You're a medical doctor. If you didn't have a high quality medical program at the UWI, you will not have good doctors in the region. Simply put. If you didn't have a high quality law school, Justice Amory, you would not have high quality lawyers. So these are related industry to the legal industry. So your medical industry is related to the University of the West Indies. The legal industry is related to, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to bring that home later on again to show you how those things are very important. The related and supported industries have to be of a certain quality for your country to move forward. So you can't have one set of man doing very well and another set of man actually operating at a low standard. So you have to look at those as well. And importantly, this is where now Mr. Lovell comes in and all the others. Because you have to make sure that the local rules and laws are supporting and motivating investments. You can't have an economy that is going to do well, but government bureaucracy is preventing innovation. You can't have it. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah? You have to ensure that governments are providing you with the incentive so that you can innovate, but you must do them in the context of the rules and the laws. So, for example, you should not have a situation where you are preventing competition from happening in an economy. It just doesn't make any sense. I give a simple example. 20 years ago in Jamaica, you had one company. Unfortunately, Paul and you and I used to work for that company, Favorite Wireless, to get a mobile phone. It was like a luxury. Up to this day, I think Favorite Wireless, if I'm not mistaken, still has about 38 years more on their monopoly. We recognize that couldn't work. And with the rule of law, with government support, with same cable wireless support, we brought the back of the monopoly and we introduced competition in the telecom sector. Today, one man in Jamaica may have 3 or 4 cell phones. Mobile penetration in Jamaica, everybody knows what it is about now. And to be fair, across the region as well, communication has improved. Take, for example, what if we never had competition and COVID came? You talk about learning loss now, you wouldn't see learning loss as yet. Think about it, because who could afford data at that point if we never had competition? All these kids were now on their tablets and were able to do school. If we never had competition to motivate the bringing down of the cost of data, bringing down the cost of the T1 lines, bringing down the cost of fiber, who, Solomon, would be able to afford it? Only 0.01% of students could actually survive on COVID. So the point that we're making here is that for the diamond to work, you must do this. Rules and laws that are motivating investments. All right? So conceptually, this is what a nation diamond looks like. Conceptually. But how are you doing empirically? So conceptually, you see what is there. How are you now doing empirically? Well, let me just run through quickly some data for you, because time is of the essence. So let us look at your factor condition And there's a lot of variables that you could use. As I said, it's not kidding you now, but there in the book, I have gone through a significant amount of empirical data that you could look at and use to measure these various elements of your diamond. But let's just take one for Antigua and Barbuda. Let us look at your literacy rate as a factor condition, because remember, for a country like yours, the most important endowment you have is what? People. Exactly. So you need to look at the literacy rate of your people. And as expected, not doing very badly at all, 98.9. Yeah? Up there with Trinidad and all the others. And generally, the Caribbean has a high level of literacy rate. That's just the fact. I mean, when you look across the globe, the literacy rate of the Caribbean is pretty high compared to other places in the world, because we have a good primary and a good secondary system. Just this morning, one of my colleagues, I think it's Professor Curtin, who sent a video to show the 10 most educated countries in the Caribbean. Yeah? And as you would expect, who's number one? Oh, you have it? Yeah, Cuba. Yeah, Cuba is number one, absolutely. Yeah? And then Barbados, exactly. But the point is that we're all up there. Yeah? We're all up there. However, we have a challenge though. We have a challenge. And what is the challenge? So on the human factor side, we can all read and write. But in a global economy that is being powered by the fourth industrial revolution as we know speak, reading and writing is necessary, but is not sufficient to move you forward. That is the challenge that we have that people not recognizing. So it's a necessary condition to have high literacy rate, but later on you're going to see that it is not a sufficient condition to move the diamond forward. And that is where, Harold, the problem comes in with policy making, because you did a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. So if you look at this, it's fine. Look at this now. Your demand condition. Remember what I said demand condition was? How sophisticated your customers are. Right? And one of the measures of that sophistication is going to look at the post-secondary education. Because the truth is that at the primary and secondary level, you really produce only numerate and literate people. That's all you produce there. You don't really produce people who are physicists and economists and lawyers. You don't do that at the primary level. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. So if you're going to build an economy going forward, you have to upgrade the skills of the people. Let me make that abundantly clear. I'm very uncomfortable with an argument that says, put all the resources into primary and secondary education and forget about tertiary. If you do that, you are building a backward economy. And I want to be quoted on that. You're building a backward economy. I want to be quoted on that. This is what is happening now. So if you look at it, when you look at the sophistication now of your customers, you're starting to recognize, ooh, look at this. St. Kitts is about 8 out of every 10 that goes to post-secondary. Grenada is about 9. Antigua, as I said, is roughly about 2. Jamaica is about 2 as well. In Latin America and the Caribbean, we are roughly about 5. So most countries in the Caribbean are actually below the Latin American and Caribbean average, except for maybe Barbados. The truth is that this data for Trinidad is outdated. You know why? Because when Trinidad saw this in 2004, I don't know how many of you here have studied the Trinidad model, but the then Minister of Finance made it abundantly clear that that can't work, and they have to increase their enrollment in post-secondary education. They came in with something called GATE, Government Assisted Tuition Exemption. And through GATE, they were able to move from 2 out of 10 to I think Trinidad is roughly about 7 or 8 or 6 or 7 out of 10. So that is clear. That policy actually works in that regard. Through what they call, some people call it free education, yeah. But at some point, some countries will have to deal with education very seriously. And so Trinidad data is a little bit outdated now, yeah. So that is the first one. Now, if you look at this as well.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead, sir.
No, it just dawned on me that we give so many scholarships here. So I'm just wondering how come our thing is so low?
So Rodney, they always say to me when we have graduation at QE. Yeah. When we have graduation at QE and people come and say, you're graduating so many people. So why we don't have more people in, why you say we don't have more people in university? But think about how many are coming from secondary school. And then you can see where the ratio is. So although we graduate maybe 9,000 at QE, remember maybe 40,000 coming from secondary school. Yeah, so that's really the issue. Right. So you also have to look at how wealthy. You also have to look at how wealthy your customers are. Because again, when your customers have certain amount of wealth, they can demand more. And demanding more, they can allow you to become more innovative, Solomon. So when you don't have the wealth, you're going to buy the cheapest stuff and things like that. But if you have the wealth, you can demand higher production, higher productivity, greater innovation. So you look at the average GDP growth, again, and I mentioned that earlier, so we can skip that. But look at the per capita income. Again, if you look at Antigua and Barbuda, you are really up there in terms of the per capita income, roughly about 18,000. And you're really behind Trinidad and St. Kitts and Barbados. All the other countries are roughly way below the general thing. If you look at Jamaica, for example, for almost 40 years, Jamaica's per capita income has been roughly about $5,000. Yeah, so you can talk about the wealth of your customers as well as part of your diamond. That is going to improve your diamond in a significant way in the demand conditions. And then unemployment as well. The more people you have employed in your labor force, the better for your demand condition, because they will have money to spend and they will spend with the companies innovate and the companies move forward. Okay, so that is important. So it's important to keep unemployment low, but make sure that it's quality employment that you're having, not just unemployment for unemployment's sake. So I wanted to mention that. And then quickly, related and supported industries, again, by all contention, Antigua is a service economy. That's it. You're a service economy. So all of your related and supported industries will have to know, think of how you're going to improve the service quality of the economy. Because if you look at it, over 2/3 of your economy is actually powered by services. That's really what this is actually saying. Okay. And therefore, if you look at the quality of the services now, construction services, big, other industries, I'm trying to understand a little bit later on what this really is, because that's the challenge I'm having. I'm not understanding other services, and I dig deep in the data, but I can't find it. But it's something that I will talk about later. But if you look at wholesale and retail services, that's a big part of your services as well. Now, this is something that really needs to change, because wholesale and retail is just that. You don't really do much. You don't really do much innovation at all. Yeah, you package and you sell. That is not going to get you very far. So that is a big part of what we do, but you have to really rethink that and go to more high value service. ICT, for example, need to have great space for innovation. Yeah, finance and insurance have also great space for innovation as well. They have to look at those kinds of things. Okay, and then firm strategy, structure, and rivalry. What I've identified here for you quickly, I don't know if you can see all of this, but I will be able to just speak a few things about this. When you look at the rules and regulation, competition rules are very important for you. So if you look at Jamaica, for example, there's a Fair Trading Commission. If you look at Trinidad and Tobago, there's a Fair Trading Commission. If you look at Barbados, Barbados has something called the Barbados Trading Commission as well. But in Antigua and Barbuda, what you have is that you have a draft. I'm not sure if anybody can attest to this one, but what the data is telling me is that you still have not established through the OECS Commission what is called a competition agency. The latest data that I have said that this is at the draft stage. The point is that you really need it, and we need it urgently, because this is critical to facilitate competition in the economy and fair competition as well. So that is something critical that we have to move forward. And I guess this is not just an Antigua thing. This seems to me that this is an OECS thing. So at some point, somebody has to take on the drive from the OECS and push this one forward, okay? And then, if you see all of that data, as I said, I just quickly rush through that in the interest of time. But the question really becomes, having seen all of that, where do you stand in terms of your diamond? You see all of that, you see the data conceptually, you see the diamond, empirically, you see the data. Some places you're doing well, some places your average is strong. But overall, where do you stand? Well, if you look at it, where do you stand overall? Now, this is a challenge. The Global Competitiveness Report, which really ranks countries in terms of their levels of competitiveness, which is basically emanating from the diamond. It gives you a rank of the countries and say, where do you stack up in terms of the rest of the world? For a significant period of time, Singapore has always been ranked the #1 most competitive country in the world, right? Unfortunately, what I can't find is Antigua anywhere. We see Jamaica, we see Trinidad. So if you look at it, the lower numbers mean that they're higher ranked. So Trinidad, as you would have seen in the in the latest, their competitiveness has actually deteriorated. Guyana has deteriorated, Jamaica deteriorated, Barbados deteriorated. Yeah. So there's something going on here. We have to look at it. So I couldn't find Antigua in the global competitiveness ranking. But what I did was to use a proxy variable for your diamond and see where you stand. So I used the doing business index. Because as you know, the doing business is also an important part of how strong the economy is. Yeah. So when you look at this is the troublesome part about the Caribbean. So as I said before, this is not just an Antigua issue, but the troublesome part of this Caribbean is that their diamond really needs some work. Almost every country except Jamaica has seen a deterioration in their doing business. Every single one. Antigua deteriorated, Barbados deteriorated, Dominica deteriorated, Grenada deteriorated, St. Kitts deteriorated, Trinidad deteriorated, St. Vincent deteriorated, Jamaica improved by about 19 points. Yeah. So if you look at both variables together, what the conclusion you would draw is that your diamond needs some work if you're going to become that economic powerhouse. It needs some work because where we are now, the state of our diamond suggests that we're going to have to do something. But there's hope. There's hope. Because, as I said, you have a foundation on which to build. So where is that hope coming from? Well, updating your diamond. When I conceptualized this talk, I specifically wanted to include the role of the University of the West Indies in it. Because this, ladies and gentlemen, is a master stroke to help to improve your diamond, as you would have seen earlier. It's a master stroke. Because as I said before, what you have as your greatest endowment is your people. And if you're going to improve the diamond, you must improve your people. Correct? You must improve your people. So, the UWI, as you know, was conceptualized and executed in this sub-region for a specific purpose. And that is to grant access to more post-secondary education. Because once that access is now there, you can see the entire configuration of your diamond is going to change. And I'm going to show you how later on. So as you know, we have a very clear vision here at 5 Islands. We're very clear in our minds. Yeah, we need to move this 2 in 10 to at least 6 in 10 over the next decade. Some people say we want it earlier, but we're going to have to make it happen. Because as you recognize, without that, you don't have much endowment. You don't have oil like Trinidad, you don't have bauxite like Jamaica, you don't have gold and things like Guyana. Guyana is no oil country, yeah? So you don't even have to worry about that. You don't have that, but you have your people, so you have to upgrade your people. So UWI is here to help, and UWI says we are going to help you. We are going to move from 2 in 10 to 6 in 10. We are helping. We're going to do that, and that is what our role is, and we're going to work with all the other institutions of higher learning to make this become a reality. Because UWI alone can't do it. So you have to go to your state college, you have to go to your high schools and everybody and upgrade. So that is important for us. We're doing it both organically and inorganically. Just a quick note as to where we are. So when we started in 2019, we had only 178 students. Today we have over 430, and we are expected to reach at least 700 by September coming. So that is a step in the right direction, Salomon, because we are going towards 60%. Similarly, we have also established, you talked about it earlier, Salomon, the School of Computing, Science and Artificial Intelligence. Very critical school, because as we said, as the fourth industrial revolution unfolds, we're talking about the next set of digital learners. And everything will be digital going forward. So that school is an important part of our architecture in terms of allowing us to achieve that vision that we've set ourselves. And there are other significant things, as I said, I'm just talking about a few. We've also launched some new programs. We are getting there. Some new programs, Masters in Corporate Finance, and I'll say why that is important later on. Masters in Teaching Education for Special Needs, BSc in Data Science, BSc in Early Childhood Education, BSc in Tourism. These are new programs that are coming on street as we speak come September. Yeah, these are important portfolio development that will move the agenda forward, and we have more coming. And I will speak to them at another time about our agenda for the new academic year. But these are important developments that we have had over the last few months. Solomon, you spoke about this. Though not everyone is going to have degrees, but some people really want short cycle courses. And we have partnered with the best in the world to give credential of readiness to our local people as well. We have partnered with Harvard Business School, and we are now through our lifelong learning unit offering Harvard credential of readiness. And the beauty, Paul Lee just sent me an email a few days ago. We now have the certificate, and for the first time, you will see UWI and Harvard on the same certificate. Similarly, this is cute. If nothing gives you hope, if nothing makes you feel great that you want to be here, this is it. Now, you know what this is, right? This is the new UWI Five Islands campus over the next 3 to 5 years. This is where we are now. So we are here now. The architect told me that we are here right now. Can you imagine 5 years time you come over here? This is exactly how the Five Island village look. What a transformation that will happen over here. So Rodney, you have to lobby or Howard, you have to lobby some way or somehow to get another entrance and exit to Five Island, because when this village starts buzzing, this one road, this is now can't work. Yeah? But this is the new Five Islands, this is the new master plan for the campus. This is where we're going. And this is why I talked about PS Greenaway earlier, because PS Greenaway has been working with us, has been supportive of us to get this agenda item going. We have in our sports facilities, student facilities, dormitories, teaching labs, teaching and learning center, administrative, everything. So this is what the new Five Islands village will be looking like. If we're going to get to 5 to 6 and 10, this facility can't do it. We have to have a new facility to do it. And this is really the work of art at its best in terms of moving the Five Islands campus forward. We're looking for your partnership, we're looking for your support, and we're going to be talking to you about it later on. So that's the academic side of things. The academic partnership is growing. It's a master stroke to have had Five Islands here to help with that diamond. But the academic side alone is not sufficient. It is necessary, but it's not sufficient. You also need the enterprise. The enterprise is going to be critical now for you to actually have the diamond to upgrade. So what I'm going to report on very quickly is to just talk quickly about a study that I've done to look at how sophisticated your firms can be in order to improve that diamond. And I will take literally about 10 minutes to rush through this. Yeah. So the first thing that you need to do, how competitive are Antiguan firms? Now, all I'm doing here is to give you a framework. I'm literally running through this. I'm just giving you a framework that you can use to do a test of how competitive your firms are. Okay? So you need to be exporting, you need to be engaging in foreign direct investment, you need to operate at international standards, and you need to earn money out of Antiguan, outside of Antiguan value. Simple put. Okay? So you can use this as a metric to test how competitive your firms are. You have to also know where you're operating. So you need to know what your industry looks like. Because the problem that you have in business is, see, most people say, I'm a businessman, but they don't know the industry very well. They don't know. Some people that come and they say, okay, they say, I'm in the financial industry. Yeah, you're in the financial industry, but the financial industry is huge. What part of the financial industry you're playing in? Are you playing in capital markets? Are you playing in commercial banks? You have to know this in order for your firm to do well. So this again is a framework that you can use, and as I said, I will have these tools available that you can actually use to test your thing, and we can talk about it later on. You have to also know your strategy. You have to know, do you want every customer to come into your bank, or do you just want a select few? It's a very important question. There's a piece of work that I always tell you that 20% of your customer gives you 80% of the profit, and the 80% gives you only 20%. So the question you ask them as a businessman, should I spend my money on that 20%, that 80%, and let them come in my place and make a lot of noise? Or do I focus on that 20% and give them great value? Something that you have to determine. So you have to know your strategy. Do you go cost leadership, or do you go differentiation? These are all tools, as I said, that can help you to determine. Because building in my argument about the sophisticatedness of your firm, I have to go through all of this to test whether or not the firms are really sophisticated. And I want to know if Antiguan firms actually fit that model. So, how sophisticated is your firm then? just for the theoreticians in the place, and because this is an academic lecture, I don't want Hiram to leave here and say, boy, you come up with these conclusions and I don't know where to get them from. So I use some critical theoretical frameworks, limited portfolio theory, which basically says that you don't have a lot of resources, so that means that you're not going to do well. We use the efficiency theory, and I also use market structure theory and the critical resource-based view of the firm theory. And it is these theoretical frameworks that have allowed me now to make a conclusion about how sophisticated a company's strategy is. And as I said, I wait for the questions to go through these, but I won't spend much time on that. So Hiram, you can't cost me that I don't get my theory right, yeah? Good. So critically, guys, what are some of the lessons that we can learn based on the study that we carried out across the region? And this study was carried out not only in Jamaica, it was Jamaica, Guyana, St. Kitts, Trinidad, and I think I used I don't remember the Antigua firms are there, yeah? But anyways, the common lessons that we learned, if you're going to build an effective and sophisticated firm strategy. One, you have to have proper risk management. Oops. You have to have proper risk management, meaning that you have to focus. You have to say, okay, if I'm going to build a firm and I'm say in the business of, let me just use an example. Say I'm in the hotel business. You don't want to diversify too far from hotel and start owning banks and then start owning insurance company and stuff. You may want to own a farm that is going to provide your ingredients that you need for your restaurant, but you don't want to go too far, because what we found is that the companies that diversify too far are companies that fail. Simple. So take, for example, the financial sector. Once we had, in the case of Jamaica, you had banks owning agricultural corporations, banks owning real estate and these massive real estate stuff. So when the financial collapse happened in 1996, a lot of those banks went under. You know why? Because remember now, what causes a financial collapse is that people want their money to be converted quickly. You can't sell a house tomorrow morning. You can't sell an orange farm tomorrow morning. You can encash a bond tomorrow morning. So when you diversify too far from your core, you end up in trouble. So the point is simply this: if you want your firm strategy to be very sophisticated, don't go too far from your core. That's really the point. Yeah. So we also saw workplace transformation as an important element of this. It means investment in your human capital. That's really what this is saying. People invested in their human capital, upgrading their staff, and their staff continue to do well. The firms that do well are the firms that do best. Then we also had benchmarking. As I said before, remember I started off the lecture by benchmarking Antigua with Singapore. Because if you're going to get there, you have to know what is out there. But benchmarking is not just a comparative analysis. You do comparative analysis and then you say, how can I improve based on where the gaps are? So that is very important. Then you have networking. Network relationships are very, very important. Yeah, especially for small companies. You need to have what is called business to business relationship. And most of the businessmen in this room, they will tell you, it's very hard for a small firm to survive on B2C customers only. You can't do business to just large scale customers, you need B2B. And this is where, Harold, the government comes in, because the government can be a great player in B2B operation. But again, I will have a discussion on that later on. And you have to also know your products. Know your products, know what you're selling, so that you have knowledge about what you can improve. Yes? Innovation and marketing, always important. Always use the technology, always innovate, always do things differently and do things better. Yeah? You know, one of the things that we found for the firms that didn't do well, because I had to do a comparison of those who survived and those who didn't. And you know, invariably, those who did not survive, you know what happened to them? They had the same product annually from 1970, remember it was a firm. And in 2010 or 2011, the same exact product they started in 1972 is what they had in 2012. So there's no way they could have survived, because things and times have changed. So you have to innovate. But most critically, in all of this is corporate leadership. If you don't have the right leader that is going to motivate the firm to do all of these things, forget it. If you have a leader who just wants to just be there because it's a nice thing to be a leader, and you're not engaging with these kinds of innovation, you're not engaging with the new developments, you're not going to courses and renewing, upgrading yourself, you're not going to short cycle courses like the LLU, upgrading yourself, know what is in the market, you're in trouble. It's not going to work. You have to get a cutting edge. That's the reality.
You're going to get the dull diamond.
Absolutely. Very good. Yeah. So therefore, if I were to quickly summarize everything I just said, at the heart of upgrading your enterprise is leadership. That's really what this is all about, in summary. So this circle here, if you were to put all of the factors in a concentric circle, at the heart of that circle is leadership. If you have the right leadership, then believe me, anything is possible. Without the right leadership, you're in trouble. So it is very important. So ladies and gentlemen, this is it. If you want to move this thing forward, you have to upgrade your diamond. But you're upgrading your diamond using both academic enterprise, and see how the academic enterprise works here now. Notice, the academic enterprise is impacting through research and innovation related and supporting industry. I just gave the example of the medical school earlier, yeah? And there are others you could think about. It's also upgrading, looking at your factor conditions, because you're upgrading your human resources as well. That's the universities here working, right? And you're also upgrading demand condition, because you're making your customers become much more sophisticated as well. Because with higher education, more than likely you're going to be wealthier. And with you being wealthier, you're more than likely becoming more demanding. And with you becoming more demanding, more than likely your firms have to innovate. And with your firms innovating, more than likely the diamond have to improve. And then international business is so critical for your diamond to improve. Because what international businesses do, and Solomon, you can attest to this, and all the other business members in the audience, when you're starting to compete globally, the standards just have to improve. You can't use local standards alone. So as a result of that, your firm's strategy, structural rivalry significantly improves. Because when you're starting to go international, you better make sure that the government's environment is conducive for international trade. Because remember now, you can't have your containers stuck at the wharf because nobody is actually there to open the door for the ship in the morning. You can't do that if you do international business. That's just the reality. So you have to upgrade that. And you also upgrade your demand condition. Because what happens is that when you go international, your consumers are so demanding on the international stage that what you do is that you starting to produce even much better quality. I don't know if you ever noticed that the firms that export in any country always have higher quality than those domestic firms. That's just the reality. So when I study these firms, I look at the exporters and the non-exporters, and the firms that export, invariably, their quality standards are much higher because the international market forces them to do that. So if you want more of your diamond to be improved, then you have to get more of your firms to start to go international. That's just the reality of it. And importantly for small economies like ours, as I said, if I was in a lecture, I would prove it, and genuinely prove it through mathematics, that if you export, your overall cost actually goes down. Yeah? And as a result of that, you become much more competitive. But I'll leave that for another lecture, okay? And so your upgraded diamond. So this is your upgraded diamond. Your upgraded diamond now starting to look at something different. Yeah? Academics, enterprise, changing the shape of your diamond, upgrading your diamond through the various elements of the diamond. So what are the agenda items that we need to do? Quickly, what we need to do is to have what I call balanced partnership. You need balanced partnership for this to work. You need governments to do what governments do, Mr. Lover. You need governments to incentivize programs and to make the business environment become much more hospitable for doing business. You need industry to do what they're supposed to do, which is commercialize the operations that are coming out of academia and to deal with their manufacturing and their processing and distribution and all those kinds of things. And you need the academic enterprise to do what they ought to do. They are supposed to produce the human capital resources, providing technical assistance, providing new technology, and build your human capital. So if you think about it, this is what Solomon spoke about earlier, your triple helix model. So for you to upgrade the diamond, what you need is balanced partnership among all the players in the helix model. So if I were to bring it home, in Jamaica, I don't know if the same thing happened here in Antigua, but when you go to country church, yeah, and those of you who go to country church, yeah, and the pastor is going on forever, there's always an old lady in the back who says, bring it home, bring it home. So I'm bringing it home now. I'm bringing it home. Yeah? So in bringing it home, I would like to say some critical agenda items. Critical agenda items. One, investment in education, especially post-secondary education, to increase the sophistication of the firm and the customer. Firm strategy and the customer. And this is a responsibility of academia and government. So what I'm doing here is to identify the critical people who need to act. So you need investment in education, especially post-education, post-secondary education. You need stronger doing business environment. to ensure firms can survive and prosper. This is solely the responsibility of the governmental architecture. They need to make their environment become hospitable for doing business. And what does that entail? A lot of things. That's another lecture. I won't get into that. You need institutional strengthening, starting with this, a strong statistical agency. As I told you before, one of the challenges that I had in doing this work is finding data for the sub-region. Unfortunately, very, very, very difficult. And if you can't get data, you can't get this job. That's just the reality. And I'm strongly urging those who have influence in here surrounding, to please, let us start thinking through how we build a proper statistical agency so we can go online and get any data we want at any time.
But that's why I expect you as university to assist the government.
So look at it. So look at it. Who are the owners we have here? We have academia and government. So you're spot on. So we're going to get that done. Yeah. And then we have upgrade firm sophistication through corporate training and development. So again, what this is suggesting, we need a strong business school in the region. We need a very strong business school to facilitate competitive enterprises that can trade globally. Simply put, an Antiguan firm operating in Antigua is not going to work. Because if you don't go to the competition is going to come to you. That is just the reality. If you don't go, the competition will come and the competition will wipe you. All right. So we need proper corporate training as well. As I said before, data is a new oil, and especially for small states like Antigua and Barbuda. If we don't get the data to make proper decisions, we are going to be in trouble. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I bring it home, I want to say to you that you should seize the moment to upgrade your diamond and watch Antigua and Barbuda not only survive, because we're not in survival mode, but we want to survive and prosper in a hospitable global economy. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Williams, for that very thought-provoking, somewhat controversial
treatise, and I'm sure you will have a number of questions. And so I'd like to invite Shiva Maloney. I believe he will pass the mic around. So simply indicate if you want to raise a question, you'll be identified, you identify yourself, and then Shiva will bring the mic to you. So we open the floor for questions.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Professor Williams, for that. At this time, we're going to open the floor for Q&A and for any comments. So if you kindly indicate,
I'll bring the mic to you. So we have our gentleman already in the back, and then I'll come back to you, Dr. Thomas. I think you should come forward because the camera is here. So if there's anybody who is sitting behind it, you just kindly come forward. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sing. Good afternoon. I think I speak for everyone when I say that was quite an enjoyable lecture. I remember the days of being in school and listening to lectures by professors, sometimes halfway through your sleep. But you have the character that's able to keep people up, even after a long day at work. Right. But I just have some comments. I was very intrigued by the presentation. Unfortunately, the sound isn't as good at the back as it is in the front. But I did hear a reference to the importance of an enabling environment. Sorry, my name is Adlai Smith, and I'm in the law reform department in the Attorney General's chambers for the government of Antigua and Barbuda. And I want to emphasize how important that enabling legal environment is first and foremost. But even before that, I think that one of the problems that we have here in this country, basic things, we need to learn how to relate to each other in a respectful way. A lot of times when we disagree with people's points and so on, we chastise them. We attack them. The ad hominem approach has got to end in 2022 after so many years of independence. We need to learn how to get along with each other, learn to disagree, or agree to disagree, so to speak. And unless we deal with that, we're going to have a problem going forward as a nation. That's the first point. My second point is related to the first. We need to learn how to engage in a respectful or what I would term conflict resolution strategies. It needs to be taught at every level, not just in the post-secondary level, but also the primary school and the secondary school level. And the importance of that has to do with if persons can learn how to resolve conflicts, when not just in your daily person-to-person activity, but in the context of business and so on. Because if you do that in business, you have less cases going before the court. And if less cases go before the court has more time to deal with other issues. And then when the court can deal with more issues, you have a better ease of doing business in Antigua and Barbuda. Everything is related. The third point I want to make has to do with what I really want to come to, the enabling environment and anti-corruption climate. Corruption is something which I think you need a whole lecture on to show how that is inimical to a country's economy. It costs our GDP. It costs our capacity to earn. And if the anti-corruption climate in this country is not improved significantly, we are not going to achieve those desirables or achievables that you mentioned in the lecture. I know currently I'm working with Dr. Wu with respect to updating our anti-corruption legislation. And I suspect, having looked at different countries around the world and what they're doing, I strongly suspect that we may get some pushback on what we're doing. But I decided to use this context to let them know, well, we're coming because we're really concerned about dealing with corruption in this country. Not just at a politician level, but also in a private sector level as well. So those are my few comments.
Thanks, sir. I'll let Professor Williams give his brief response.
No, I mean, there's not much to really add, except to say that you're correct that corruption is really a cost of doing business. It's an additional tax, if you wish. I study economics, I don't study law and those things, but you're very correct that if the enabling environment ought to improve, then you have to deal with the corruption issues in a very serious way. But remember, this is not something that is unique to any jurisdiction. This is all over. And so that is why we're calling, for example, for a proper fair trading agency, that the rule of law must work. And just this here, you can give a better lecture and that than I can do. But yeah, the rule of law has to work. That's really the point. Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rhonda C. Thomas, Chief Medical Officer in Antigua and Barbuda. And I want to thank you, Professor, for that excellent presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I learned a couple of things. I mean, I was a bit intrigued about the diamond, but I understand. As a public health specialist, I look at the health of populations, and I realized that in your lecture, you didn't speak much about the health of the population. We all know that the health of the nation is the wealth of the nation. And to use some of the examples you gave, if you want to increase the number of students going into tertiary education from 2 to 6, but, you have to make sure that the children are healthy. Yes. An anemic child, a child that's malnourished can't learn. So we need to look at that. If a child even makes it into adolescence, you want to make sure that that child is not impacted by motor vehicle accidents or violence or injuries that actually impact the health of our adolescents. If you go a bit further into adulthood, diabetes, hypertension, cancers. Those things cause disability and death in the working population. And if it is we wanted to get to an economic powerhouse, we really need to look at the health of the population and the health of the nation. And I just wonder if at any time during your research or in the study of the subject, if that came out as an important factor in moving forward.
Thank you very much, Seymour. That's an excellent question. I'm sorry that the picture is not on, because what you spoke about a while ago is exactly related to what we call the related and supporting industry. You're very correct. There is no way that you could go forward without looking at the health and well-being of your nation. So in the book, one of the books actually, we did actually do a number of variables around healthcare as well. We look at, for example, fertility rate. We look at, because as you know, there's a challenge right now globally with fertility rate. If the fertility rate remains as we now have it, you know more than most persons, and so Rodney you know as well, I don't think we can replace the population in the next 50 years because fertility rate is just too low. I'm surprised that in the Caribbean fertility rate is so low. So it's important. So we look at variables like those, but we look at things to do with like the sugar content that we take in and all of those variables. And we took all of those. And that's why the diamond is so important, because it's a confluence of factors that really impact on economic growth, which is why I didn't go for my traditional lecture, which is run a nice regression model and show you how interest rate and other things impact growth. I'd rather to go for something that is more substantial, which is a diamond, which captures exactly the kind of things that you're saying. Yeah, so it really is there. Shavar, I think Mr. Lovell would like to have a say. So,
Okay, then, so we'll take Mr. Lovell and then we have 3 persons.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Should I stand on? Yeah, okay. Well, let me join with the others and commend you for very enlightening, entertaining, and certainly very interesting presentation. A few observations. Jamaica, I believe, did some time ago a Vision 2030, and I think the Bahamas has a Vision 2040. I wanted to know whether you felt that having that type of planned approach, to the extent to which you feel it is a fetter or it encourages the growth of economies where you allow for the free enterprise system to develop rather than appear to put preconditions for the type of outcome that you're seeking. That's one. I'll try not to be too long, but I have. The second thing I wanted to raise is that tension between competition and nationalism. For example, within our banking sector, we have less banks, but we have more Antiguan banks. Is this good, or is this a trend that we ought to be careful about? Because you may have less competition, but at the same time, we as Antiguans and Barbudans have a sense of pride in owning more, and even though we have less competition. The third thing is ideas on new strategic sectors in our economy. I'm thinking of making Antigua and Barbuda the aviation center of excellence for the Caribbean, using what I think would be our competitive advantage in respect of our geographical position, the engineering department for LEAC, and some assets situated around the BC Bird International Airport. And in addition to that, we have a culture where Sea Island cotton was once very important. And I wonder whether we shouldn't be exploring a vertically integrated cotton industry where we not only grow the cotton, we produce the fabric, and then we can produce high value garments with a big international brand. Then when you speak of Singapore, now Singapore achieved great success, but I think we all know that Lee Kuan Yew was really no Democrat. And he achieved by what some would say compulsion, by some very strong anti-labor laws and these type of things. But in today's world, it seems that what was previously achieved maybe by compulsion, we have to achieve by social consensus. And what are the strategies that we could use in helping to build a social consensus around the improvement of our diamond and achieving the vision that I think all Antiguans would want to achieve, which would be a greater level of economic growth and greater inclusiveness within our society. And then the business culture in Antigua, I think you touched on that in terms of maybe the business school. However, I wonder whether the culture, we have a saying in Antigua, which is pernicious, that a partnership is a leaky ship, as a result of which you had a lot of businesses that we knew in the 60s and 70s, mom and pop businesses, and they've all gone under because there was no continuity. The business model was one which was not, did not cater for succession and continuity in that sense. And then role of government. Government as enabler as opposed to government as competitor. I would like to hear your views on that. And then tourism. Tourism as an export. I notice many times we speak of tourism as though it is not an export, and we look at manufacturing and things that you package and send overseas. But isn't tourism an export where the consumer consumes the product locally? I know I've been very long, and I do apologize for that. I'll be happy if you can even touch a few.
Thank you. No, thank you, Mr. Lovell. Thank you very much. Now, you see, if I were in a lecture and we do great class participation, more than likely you get an A because it seems that you were listening because you've touched on all the issues that I have actually touched on. But no, let me just quickly though, because for time, let me just quickly rush through a few of them. So tourism as an export, yes, it is. Under the GATS agreement, the new modality for service. Remember, the customer can come and take the service on your economy and it's considered a service. So it's again for your statistical agency to actually deal with this, whether it be OECS agency or you. But the GATS agreement, I think mode 4, Ambassador Joseph, you're closer to these things than I am, yeah? But mode 4 of the GATS agreement, yeah? Yes. I think does allow for that.
That's correct. And
that's
implications for taxation.
Right. Okay, good. So that's done. Succession planning in business, again, as I said before, the study that I did, it would be really useful for you to, one of the books out there would actually have these kinds of things. I think one of the books will have a lot of work on these cases of those businesses that survive. And it speaks to these kinds of issues about succession planning and all of those kinds of things. So that's very useful if you could take some of the cases and look at that. Yeah. The need for social partnership. I don't think you could ever get it more right than to say that, because if you look at the environment 40 years ago that Lee Kuan Yew and them operated under, you're very correct. The same kind of, put this way, the world today is more peaceable. And notice the word, of course, the word I use, peaceable, not peaceful.
Oh.
Peaceable, meaning that more people want peace. Yeah. Yes, more people want peace, but you still don't have a lot of peace. So the world is more peaceable today than it was 40 years ago or 50 years ago. So the type of things that people would have gotten away with, they wouldn't get away with today. But importantly though, the new paradigm for development is partnership and consensus building. So I would invite you to look at Irish model of social partnership if you want to get a lot more information on this. The Irish model of social partnership, it works and you can look at that, okay? The vertically integrated cotton business, the truth is that new sectors are always important. So aviation, the blue economy is a huge opportunity there as well. CL and cotton, as you talk about the vertically integrated business, but let me just be very, very clear though. Again, it goes back to the framework that I gave you earlier. If you're talking about, say, for example, CL and cotton and to build a vertical integrated business, you have to know exactly which part of that industry you're playing in, because it's not an industry that you can take lightly, because there are so many players and it's a cartelized industry basically. So you have to be so careful that you study very well, because you can go in there and lose a lot of money. Yeah, so you need to be very, very clear on that one. In terms of local ownership versus foreign ownership, I always take a very, I wouldn't say laissez-faire view of competition, but ownership for me doesn't really matter. What matters is that the benefits redound to the locationality that the people actually are in. because I wouldn't want to take up this xenophobic approach towards ownership of capital and say whether it should be local or international, and then you drive away international capital, which, by the way, you would appreciate. I don't know if you have ever seen this piece of work by the late Professor Francis. He did a piece of work in Jamaica called Omar versus Domar. Now, Omar Davis was then Minister of Finance in Jamaica, and Harad Domar, as you know, is a growth economist. And the general point is that in the region, we don't have enough savings for investment. That's just the reality. The savings ratio is too low. So when you look at the call on capital, we really don't have a lot of capital. So what you don't want to do is to have a discourse about local versus foreign ownership and give the impression that you're very xenophobic and you're driving away global capital, and then you don't get the kind of investment. Because, for example, if you just take one firm, take a major conglomerate, Answer McCall. If Answer McCall wanted to raise a bond for 5 billion US or so, more than likely no single bank in the region could do that. More than likely you have to syndicate it. You follow? So you can start to see the call on capital that you don't want to take that approach at all. You want to get the discourse in a way that is welcoming. But again, the gentleman who spoke first spoke about the regulatory framework. It must be done in a way that is transparent, that is actually redounding to the benefit of the people. And so I would rather just shape the discourse in that way. The final one has to do with national planning versus, well, I think you were really referring to state planning, yeah, versus the ability of enterprises to work, yeah. The truth is that development plans do work. What they do, they provide you with a kind of a roadmap to say, let us use this as a rallying cry. So if you look at Jamaica, for example, 2030, Vision 2030, we are now 7 years out. I can tell you, we're very close to it. But it provides a rallying cry for you to say, come guys, let us do something. And that's really one of the main purpose of it. You can get something going, you can put people around it. I think all countries need one. I think all countries need one. But then how you monitor and how you resource the plan is going to really make the difference going forward. So that's what I would say on that. Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Professor. I would say that you whet our appetites. And I think for the most part, you're preaching to the choir. The question I have right now, and I'm not sure.
So I brought it home well.
Yes, you did. I'm still concerned though that in the context of balanced partnership, yes, that is a missing part here. I don't see any significant policymaker in this room today. Perhaps you're going to give them a private audience, I hope. Because if you're giving this message to us, I think all of us need to get the message at the same time, because ultimately, as far as I'm concerned, the next stage of this is action. So my question is, okay, now we see, we have an idea where we want to go, but the question is, what is the next step? What do you say is the next step? How do we get from this concept, this recognition that we need to do something? Because I like to think not doing something is not a good alternative. So the question is, what do we need to do to get to the next step? How do we get this train on the track and start?
Thank you very much. This is an excellent input, because you know, if I were in the business of let me not go there. Simply put, the next step is action. Yes, and how do you get action? Action comes through leadership. Somebody has to take leadership and ownership of this, and somebody has to put it forward. That's a simple way to put it, because if somebody doesn't own it and starting to action it, it won't go anywhere. So is it the private sector? Is it the government? We in academia, we're trying to do what we can do, but we're reaching out. And the reaching out suggests that we're coming to our private sector partners, we're coming to our governmental partners, and we're saying, let us sit at the table. So our first action is to get everybody at the table. And having got everybody at the table and say to them, this is the state of the land. How do we now get it going? And then leadership now has to start assigning resources to mobilize and move it forward. So that's a simple answer that I will give, and I will have better answer over drinks. Yeah.
Professor, and so this very esteemed campus, I just want to thank you for a very motivating and very fair and peaceable lecture. You know, one has to start, so let me begin. You start by beginning. And so in 2007, the Dean of Morehouse is in Antigua, and I'm giving some scholarships to recruit some young Antiguans. As you know, it's an all male school. And he comes back from the Antigua State College, and in tears he says to me, "What's wrong with the boys?" Because he was there, and the only engagement he had was coming from the females. And so I go there because there's something fundamental, and you put your hands in it, and in the interest of time, and I understand that we're up against the tyranny of the clock already, and so I won't want to be too long. But I believe that it speaks to a social disconnect that he was discovering. And you talked about a company, I believe, in Jamaica, who had the same type of products almost 3 decades later. And nowhere around here tonight are our fathers, excluding mine, because we never had a car, BMC, Hillman, Minimore, whatever. Those cars don't exist. But if you look inside our education system, it's the same model. It is socially unfriendly. It doesn't create and establish and encourage partnership. So the tiers are, I'm the bright one, you're the dunce one, so that there's no collaboration. And if you can imagine, that is what it is. So it does not foster entrepreneurship. So it is sole proprietorship. And so you see the failure cascading all around us. From the Bahamas up in the north to Suriname down in the south is the same. It's like when you see two people and two ugly people inside and who's better looking. And you know you really have it wrong. We're really talking about ugly. And so if you want to change and let the Five Islands campus become real in our lives, I'm strongly suggesting we need to fix it at the base. This thing called primary, especially secondary education, listen, it absolutely speaks against everything that needs to be social about us. So you will not see a boy and a girl holding hands coming down Market Street from 4th and 5th form. We just don't allow that. And dating, crazy? So she gets stuck with this guy, but she never learned the ways of boys. So she just only can have one boyfriend. And there's a city. So everything you see is a social, structure that is feeding back to all the things we see around here. And it breeds corruption too, because it's not enough of us doing the kind of work we need to do. I really want to appreciate you tonight and promise you that I will find your number, and when you get tired of me, I know you would not take the call, but we have a lot of work to do, but I think that has been a great beginning. I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that comment, but I'm very happy that you would have made a comment because the PS is here. Yes, you know, I put you on the spot. But the PS is here is the right person to talk about dealing with education on the curriculum. So thank you very much for that comment. Ambassador, please.
Thank you. And let me congratulate you and your staff for putting on what is the first of a series of lectures that you have promised us. I just want to touch on something very specific, and that is the issue of global standards. And how can small economies like ours achieve the demands of global standards, given our lack of economy of scale, given the competitiveness that is out there, and the cost of achievement of global standards. A practical example, you see, where in our effort in Antigua and Barbuda to achieve global standard as against our neighbors that are in the European community, Guadeloupe and Martinique. A simple thing like fishing, where if you catch conch, the conch industry in Antigua is almost destroyed because of what I call non-tariff barriers that are imposed by Europe on countries that are not within their economic space. So fishermen from Guadeloupe can go and harvest conch, or come to Antigua and what we call over the side of the vessel sail, engage in that trade, and we cannot ship our conch directly to Europe because we have to meet global standards. They can take it in our boats, take it to Guadeloupe, and put it right in that market without having to meet global standards, and they are our competitors. Right. So how can we achieve an economic powerhouse within the framework of the type of Eurocentric environment which we have to operate under at this time, and the cost of achieving that within the same global competitiveness with a small economy?
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to make 2 quick points on that. The issue of standards, you are absolutely correct. Some years ago, I think maybe 2020 or 2013, I did a piece of work looking at standards and trade. And interestingly, the most significant variable I found, looking at CARICOM trading with Europe and North America, was actually global standards. Yeah, the paper is published in, I think it's a journal called Transition Journal. Yeah, so you can look at it. But it's a very significant variable. But what I found, interestingly, is exactly where you're going, because the challenge that persons had, especially the smaller firms, was the cost of maintaining standards. And so the recommendation is that when it comes to global standards, especially for countries like ours, that's where the role of government comes in big time. So what you need to do, for example, in Jamaica, they have, for example, the Scientific Research Council, or the Bureau of Standards, right? And we also have the promotion agency JAMPRO, because that's a standards issue as well. Those agencies which are funded by the government need to provide that kind of service, especially to smaller companies that really, you're correct, they cannot afford it at all. And within that comes also the regulatory framework to actually match us, which is why we spoke about the competition laws, for example, because the situation you described with Guadeloupe it is. For example, if you have proper competition laws, those things can happen. So what you really need to do is enshrine a proper fair trading agency, I don't know what you want to call it, consumer protection agency or what have you, and enforce the laws along those lines. But again, that's a role of government. Competition agency, standard agencies and stuff, that's a big investment for government to make. That's what we support as part of the facilitatory and supporting environment, especially for doing business, because the smaller firms are just not going to cut it. What we found in that study, that the small firms would die if they were to do it, if they were to do their standards themselves. They cannot do it at all. And so the bureaus and all those things, they go there, they subsidize service, and they were able to make it. Very, very critical and important. Yeah.
All right, so we'll take our last 2 questions, Professor. So ladies first.
Thank you. My name is Anne-Marie Martin, and my daughter is one of the first students here in Antigua, University of the West Indies. So I'm very proud. And I listened to you very carefully, and I see the beginning and the end is improving our intellectual capital. And when my daughter came back from registering, I asked her, what is the cost of the tuition? She told me $4,900. I said, per term? She said, no, per year. I said, you sure go back and check for me. And so when I calculated it, it cost us $408 per month for university degree. Now, it was so enticing for us that she had another friend who could not afford, who came from a challenged family, and we said, let's pay for that friend. Now I'm looking around here because I see all my colleagues, all my business persons here, and I want to help you, Professor. It only costs $408 per student. And my good friend from West Indies, I was saying, if you pay for 5, I pay for 3 at the National Park. My Excellency pay for 10. Can you imagine how the process would start? And I'm thinking here, we can have all the legislation, we can have everything. But if we do not help, and because I'm into a lot of charity, as a matter of fact, my husband and I are sponsoring 2 students from the All Saints Secondary School. We do a lot of charity. And there are a lot of families with very intelligent children, but they can't afford it. And when I heard about that 20%, you know, it's the affordability. A lot of us could not afford to send our children overseas, housing, all that. It's right here now. Right. So this is my message to all of us. I hear all the intellectuals talking, right? Let's get to business. Let's start. Put aside $500 per month, leave the restaurants, leave the fancy clothes, the nails, all of that stuff, and let's start the process and help our people. That's all I want to do.
Thank you very much. My name is Garfield Joseph. I head the government's Entrepreneurial Development Fund. Thank you for defining reality for us and giving us a roadmap on the way forward. I have just a couple of quick comments. I'm a strong believer in people capability, having lived in Jamaica, worked in the US, and I know that that's very critical. So how do we change the culture? I mean, I say that in the context, I remember many years ago, coming back from college in Jamaica, I was in food and beverage in the hotel. We had a food and beverage association, and not one person in that association had any academic training. So I think culturally, we need to change the culture. Yes, that practical experience is necessary, but as you have just demonstrated, having that academic background is also important. So we need to find a way to change the culture of learning in Antigua and Barbuda. How do we do that? For me, that's critical. I know you touched on a lot of things, but I also believe that the technical area is also critical to national development. And I think we put a lot of emphasis on formal codified education, but how do we get, especially those of other types of intelligence, to participate in nation building? And I think we really need it in a very significant way. I see a lot of young folks, not very academically inclined, but very smart on the technical side. And we have to create an enabling environment for those folks in terms of national development. So my closing comments are these. I'm supposed to end with some questions. When are we going to have some more lectures like these? Because I think it is critical. Honestly speaking, I think it's critical because there are a number of persons in government, private sector, who may not be able to go back to school academically, but they can learn informally. This lecture was very insightful and we learned a lot. So I think we have to find a way to put it on the calendar that maybe every quarter we have a public lecture that we can help our businesses, formal and informal, to be able to gain that knowledge. And then finally, I'm glad I came tonight because I want to find out from you, this is a question, how can we get access to your resources, not just intellectual resources, but the facilities that you own? So I'm serious because I've been brainstorming with some colleagues about doing a free webinar, lecture, and the fundamentals of investing. One of the things I struggle with is having access to resources, facilities. And so my question is, when can I make the appointment and set the schedule?
Okay, thank you, thank you. Listen, I know we're up on the clock, so I'm just going to make a few quick comments. I think those are very insightful observations and questions. Firstly, the issue to do with the facilities, we're public university, so you can talk to the relevant persons, the marketing directors there, or facilities people. We're public university, and the government invested in us, so we're here for that. Yeah? So the second thing though, has to do with the issue of public lectures, as you said. As we said, this is inaugural. This is really what universities are about. This is a very, very important part of what we do, and we're here to stay. So this is a start of something good. One of the things that we have to be very careful of is to just make the distinction between a university, especially a high quality research oriented university, and just a teaching place that do teaching. Part of a university is to bring the knowledge to the community and bring that knowledge so that the community can actually absorb it. And as you know, UWI is no joke. UWI is in the top 1.5% of global universities anywhere. We just got our rank, well, maybe you shouldn't say that because it hasn't come out, but I will tell you more about it later on. But we are doing tremendously well when it comes to our research and impact. So expect more of these to come. That's all I will say. The final thing though, but just to note that this is not a either or situation between academic skills and vocational and technical skills. It's an and. I don't like either or debates or Robbie. I actually like and, because I realize in the region we have a tendency to say we are this or we are that. We don't say we are this and we are that. It's either or. It is and. Academic skills are critical, vocational skills are critical, core skills are critical, all learners. And I can tell you what we have done at this campus, we have made it abundantly clear that every single new program that we have now come on board with, we are going to reserve at least 5% of the intake for people who have no formal academic qualifications at all, but experiential knowledge bringing them to the university. So that's what
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your questions and comments. I now hand back over to our MC, Mr. Hiram Ford.
Thank you very much, Professor Williams. You've been a wonderful audience, and I think you will agree that we have had a very stimulating and enlightening lecture. Professor Williams pointed out, this is the inaugural lecture, which means that there are more lectures to come in a more structured form. This is carnival time, and we have to thank you for gracing us with your presence. Today is 21st of July, and we're having a lecture. And I think you will agree that this lecture has been very, very, very successful. And surely we will have to have it again on an annual basis, and perhaps even have more than one lecture in a given academic year. A number of players have contributed to this lecture being what it is, and we have to give thanks. And I'd like to invite, without much further ado, Miss Andrea Vera, who will move the vote of thanks and thank all of the major contributors to this lecture. And just before she comes to the podium, to give Professor Williams a tremendous round of applause for excellent by Andrea to offer the vote of thanks. Just some quick in-house. As you know, we have invited a number of government ministers, including the Prime Minister, who had to be abroad. And so he sends his best wishes to the lecture organizers. And I suppose that when we stage this series of lectures again, that perhaps if it was structured at a later time, he would be here. So let me just say that the Prime Minister sends his best wishes for the success of this particular lecture. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I will adopt the protocols that have already been established and kindly ask that you permit me to thank all of the persons that made this inaugural public lecture possible this evening. Master of Ceremonies, Mr. Hiram Ford, for your eloquent chairing of this evening's proceedings.
Your Excellencies, Sir Rodney Williams and Lady Williams, members of cabinet, members of parliament, members of the diplomatic corps, UWI executive and officials, education officials, specially invited guests, our audience, both physically sitting here and online, for diligently listening and interacting with Professor Williams and our campus this evening. Mr. Solomon Dumith, for delivering remarks which made linkages between education and the private sector and the importance of higher education and skills necessary to empower the people of Antigua and Barbuda. Mr. Jafari Hazelwood, one of our students who graciously entertained us with musical melodies and rhythms on the steel pan. The man of the evening, Professor Denzel A. Williams, our keynote speaker, for a stimulating and enlightening lecture that rightly provided a deeper understanding and the data of how Antigua and Barbuda can become the economic powerhouse of the region by using our human capital, technology, innovation, and academic enterprise, as well as post-secondary education opportunities in order to create that diamond that attracts business in all sectors. Of course, our sponsors and contributors. We have a heartfelt thank you to the State Insurance Company Limited, the Antigua and Barbuda Transport Board, the Board of Education, the Department of Marine Services and Merchant Supply, Sir George Ryan, Cool and Smooth, Finance Services Regulatory Commission, Dues Pro Builders Limited, the Office of Parliament, the City Planning and Urban Renewal, the Multipurpose Cultural Center, Caraxes, ACB and Caribbean, Antigua and Barbuda Port Authority, the Citizenship by Investment Unit. Our media houses for graciously covering this event and allowing the information shared to reach a wider audience. ABS, Point FM, Observer, Platinum FM, and the Marketing Machine for the photography and live streaming. The external and other support persons, Ms. Karen Cabral, the Chief of Protocol in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Wesley James at the Ministry of Works, who assisted with the car park arrangements, Mrs. Paula Lee, who assisted with locating and finding sponsorship, the UWI bookshop at the Mona campus in Jamaica for accommodating 2 of Professor Williams' books on display this evening outside of this room. Ms. Sylvia Jones and Mr. Jeffrey Thompson from that bookshop. The planning committee and support team in the areas of hospitality, logistics, media, sponsorship, IT support, and administration. Mr. Hiram Ford, Karen Murdoch, in addition to her work on the team for the introduction of our distinguished speaker this evening, Skylar Alphonse, Alicia Sherman Titus, Kimon McIntosh, Hal Johnson, Kwasi Tong, Siobhan Maloney, in addition to managing the question and answer segment this evening, Lucan Robinson, Amy Jarvis, Kalina Wade, Daniela Lynch, Anne Ina Joseph, Marcia West Richards, Adiola Matthew, Taco Mussington, Akelia Brown, Elroy Thomas, Johnson Miller, all of the support staff within the projects and facilities departments, and of course, Ms. Stephanie King, the chairperson of all of these planning and organizing committees who managed and led the process of having this inaugural lecture be a success this evening. Thank you so much to the hardworking team. And of course, our students who volunteered this evening, Jasmine Vargas, Kiani De Freitas, and Melissa Gonzalez. If I've missed anyone, it is not intentional, and we do appreciate and value your support. Thank you again. Please remember to visit the bookstall outside, see Professor's books, enjoy the cocktail, and get home safely as we begin to act on how we can upgrade to a glistening diamond that will strengthen our economy and transform Antigua and Barbuda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Well done. As protocol demands, please allow the Governor General to take his leave before any of us. Yes, so I now invite the Governor General. Please stand. And because you've been a great audience, you are now invited to the reception in the courtyard.